Human feet come in two varieties, left and right. Prosthetic feet have far more varieties. Today, I'll go over K levels and the types of feet I've tried in hopes that'll help you decide which foot is best for you, unless you still have your original set. In which case, thanks for nerding out with me anyhow. Here's a picture of my first foot. Just kidding, here's my first prosthetic foot. The thing that makes it unique is that the foot can move relative to the ankle. This may not seem like a big deal to you two-leggers, but it's practically a superpower in the prosthetics world. Now look at this other leg. Notice how it's basically one piece. Comparing the two, the foot with the hydraulic ankle is obviously better, right? Not necessarily. Let's consider three factors, starting with stability versus mobility. I lived on crutches for a couple years, and even though there are fancy crutches with springs, I always preferred basic crutches. Why? Well, because they felt more stable. With springs, I felt like the crutch itself was moving at the same time I was trying to move. Other people love the spring-loaded crutches because of the shock absorption, but I just felt unstable. That same concept applies to prosthetic feet. There's a trade-off between stability and mobility. If you're athletically inclined, you might place extra value on mobility, but if you feel insecure or have balance issues, you might appreciate something that feels solid, that you know you can rely on. K levels are used to differentiate between classifications of prosthetic feet. It isn't that one type of leg is better than another, it's just that they function differently. A K0 amputee can't walk at all, such as if your amputated legs are also paralyzed. A K1 leg like this one is generally used for someone who doesn't walk much and who prioritizes stability. A K3 leg is more mobile and better suited to athletic individuals. K2 is somewhere in the middle. K4 is theoretically the most athletic, but I've been told that in reality there's not a huge difference between a leg coded as K3 versus K4. I say coded, not because I'm a spy, but because insurance is a thing. Insurance loves codes. If there's a question about what K level you are, then your provider gives you a test that gives you points based on what physical motions you're capable of doing, ranging from things like standing on one foot to jumping. The points are then tallied up, which indicates your K level. Okay? Now that we know what K levels are, let's discuss a third factor, namely weight. As cool as it is I have a movable ankle, that hydraulic ankle comes with extra weight. Keep in mind, weights feel heavier the farther they are from your core. This is why we don't carry backpacks on our feet. If you're going to take on that extra weight, you want the benefit to outweigh the drawback. This is especially true when you reflect that you're lifting this weight with leg muscles that have not only atrophied, but have been cut in half. If you're not going to do a lot of walking, then as cool as some of the fancy legs are, they might not be worth the extra weight. One unexpected drawback to my hydraulic ankle is that if you flex the ankle, it stays in that position unless something pushes it back, which makes it surprisingly tricky to walk backwards. The mechanics are just more geared towards forward motion, not backwards. Another issue is that since there are no nerves in there, I can't feel what position that ankle is in. There have been times when I've been sitting around somewhere not realizing that the way I was sitting had pushed on my ankle. Then I'd go to get up and almost trip because I didn't realize my foot wasn't at 90 degrees anymore. It's like if you were expecting to walk on flat ground only to discover that it's suddenly at a 40-degree angle. No wonder I almost fell. Thankfully, my other leg bailed me out and I didn't fall. If you already struggle with balance, or maybe you have neuropathy in your remaining foot, you can perhaps see why the fancy ankle isn't always a good idea. Even with these drawbacks, I really enjoyed my hydraulic ankle because it suited my lifestyle and the way I move. I was in a long-term relationship with that ankle until I discovered a new love. Meet my newest sidekick, the Phil Hour All-Pro. And no, this video is not sponsored. I'd seen other amputees in person and online using this leg, including one veteran who likes the All-Pro so much that he never wears the fancy bionic foot sitting in his closet. His fancy foot was heavier, so he stopped using it, which supports my previous point. As cool as the fancy legs are, they aren't necessarily the most practical option for real life. Despite hearing so many positive opinions about the All-Pro, I was hesitant to switch from the hydraulic ankle because I didn't know what I would like better. And insurance doesn't generally pay for replacement feet as often as replacement sockets. That makes it a longer-term relationship, and I was afraid of getting stuck with a foot I didn't like, though oftentimes you can ask for a trial period. Fortunately, I ended up loving the All-Pro, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't an adjustment period. Remember that analogy about the different types of crutches? Well, the fill hour is a lot more like those springy crutches. It felt different, and it took some getting used to. That first day, it felt weird walking on a spring. It felt and moved differently from my hydraulic ankle. It felt less stable because my weight was going into this empty space rather than pushing straight down through an ankle. I especially struggled going up and down ramps. This experience gave me more perspective on why K1 amputees aren't given K3 legs. But in my case, it wasn't a matter of function. Rather, this new leg was just so different from my old one that I needed a day or two to get used to it. Kind of like when you first get glasses, your brain is a little weirded out at first, but before long it feels normal. After that initial adjustment, I absolutely loved my new leg, way more than my hydraulic ankle. Because the All-Pro is flexy, it feels like I have ankle movement, even though there isn't really an ankle there. It can accommodate a range of activities, and there's a little flex side to side, which has been helpful on uneven ground. And because it's a fairly simple design, there aren't as many components and it weighs a lot less. It also costs less than my hydraulic ankle. There's some shock absorption, which I appreciate. Theoretically, I could jog on it, though I'm embarrassed to admit I haven't actually tried running. I've been too busy stabbing and kicking things. Another unexpected perk to the All-Pro is that the foot shell, meaning the plastic part that looks like a foot, is closer to the size and shape of my human foot. Obviously that won't be true for everyone, but it was great for me. You see, my last brand of foot was a tad longer, so I had to buy shoes half a size larger, which meant they were too roomy for my human foot. It was super annoying. I couldn't get that brand of foot half a size smaller, so I just put up with wearing shoes that were a little too big. I was tempted just to cut off the tip of the rubber toes, but that would probably invalidate product warranties, so I refrained. Each brand of prosthetic foot comes with its own foot shell options. I really wanted my first foot to be all black because it made me feel like a cyborg ninja. But the company that made my first foot didn't offer jet black, so I ended up with a foot shell with a skin tone close-ish to my own. Now that I have a foot from a different company, my options have changed. Turns out that Fill Hour has a black foot shell, so I was finally able to fulfill my dream of having an all-black prosthesis. The only problem is that Footless Joe had the same idea, so now I look like a copycat. What can I say? Great minds think alike. The one annoying thing about the All-Pro is that the back of the spring sticks out past the back of my shoe, so occasionally I bump into things. Honestly, it's kind of funny and makes me laugh. The Fill Hour All-Pro is definitely my favorite leg, with the caveat that I've only tried 2 different prosthetic feet, unless you count my footless peg leg and my running blade. Do you want a video about the running leg? Let me know in the comments. I'm not a medical professional and I don't claim to be the most experienced foot connoisseur around, but hopefully conceptualizing the underlying principles will give you a leg up discussing options with your prosthetist. The bottom line is that every amputee's situation is different. What's best for me might not be best for you. I hope you find the perfect foot for you so you can walk off into the sunset and... Oh, wait a minute. After you pick a foot, how do you keep it on your leg? Huh? Oh dear. After all that work picking a foot, we've still got to figure out the socket. Oh. Should I go with pin lock, suction, or vacuum? Good thing I'm working on a video about the different types of prosthetic suspension. I'll stick it here when I'm done. Or you can click the bell and be the first to see it when it comes out. In the meantime, I have a prosthetics playlist and a new amputee playlist if you want to keep learning. I'm Stephanina, and thank you for joining me on my amputee adventures.